Hi, Ghislaine. How are you?
Hi, I'm doing okay.
Welcome back. You had a good break?
Even though I had a class, kinda. Like,
That's good. Yeah, I just finished 2 classes myself for the online. But yeah, spring here again.
yeah. So we're gonna be learning Python, but for
Security.
cybersecurity.
We're gonna review this week because I want to make sure that everybody's on the same page, and then we'll learn forensic, we'll learn other things. So hi
Okay.
everyone, welcome. We'll start soon now. I think everybody pops in now. So let me open up my syllabus and we'll get started. Okay. It's the wrong version. Okay, I'll share screen. So I hope you had a good break and happy Valentine's Day. Sorry, I'm going to tie up your 2 hours this evening. But after that, you can enjoy your Valentine's dinner or whatever you normally do. So welcome to CIS-30C. We are going to learn Python scripting for cybersecurity. And I really fought for this class to go. So here we are. I know some of you are waiting for this class to finish your certificate as you already took the other classes. And some of you just started your certificate. So in the fall, I plan to re-offer the IoT one and run the advanced Python class again. Possibly, if I have time, I will do the 30B as well, which is the Python for networking. It's a little similar to this at the beginning, but it does branch off to network configuration and things like that. So with that said, we are going to look into your course content, and then we are going to do some hands-on exercise today. As some of you are familiar with Python and some of you are new to Python, so we are going to cover the basics this week. I broke it up into 2 parts. So today we're going to do part 1. On Wednesday, we're going to do part 2, which we are going to cover a little bit more advanced concept. And then we are going to follow the chapter, all of the 14 chapters until the end of the class. Okay. Any questions? All right. So let's go into our Canvas course room. I see a chat question. Yes, these meetings are recorded and I will upload the video tonight when I get home. I normally download it from Zoom and I would put it on YouTube under the playlist, and I also will drop in the playlist link on your course information over here. And also I will link the videos in your units. Okay. So that takes normally at least an hour for things to be converted from Zoom over. Yep, you're welcome. Okay, so course information is listed there. And if you're not familiar with Canvas, there's a tutorial page. Your Zoom link is also found here. This is a regular Meet online course, which means that we will meet twice a week on Zoom. Just to let you know that next Monday is going to be a holiday for President Day weekend. So there will be no class on Monday, but we will have class on Wednesday. So we will miss a session next week, but we will cover the material on Wednesday. And then we will see how good of our pace will be. I will make some adjustment as far as the plan goes. I plan to cover all the chapters and then be able to address the course learning objectives. Okay, so this course, just to give you a brief overview in the description, it requires 48 hours of lecture and 32 hours of lab. So mostly we are going to do lecture on Monday, and then on Wednesday we are going to do the lab. In the exception where we have a holiday, then we will just shift things a little bit. So we are going to look at how to use Python as a programming language to create tools for security assessment. We will look at network monitoring tools. We will look at, different type of security tools along with forensic type of library to be able to operate that as well. So finishing this class, you should be pretty strong in having the knowledge on how to use Python programming to create your own tools or even modify some of the existing tools that are open source. So we are going to look at security tasks, pen testing steps, digital forensic, and we are going to use Python and Python libraries. We can customize our tools. We will also implement some programming concept to utilize concurrency and things. So those of you who took advanced Python with me, you already touched on that, but we will dip our toes a little bit in different areas, but mostly address ethical hacking and risk assessment for with Python programming. Your learning outcome by the end of this class, you should have the skill to write Python script to make your tools for security assessment and investigative tasks. You should also be able to use Python packages and libraries to create different features and also implement web assessment tools. You will also will be able to create scanners or utilize script for scanning network and network devices, and then be able to assess exploit and look at risk assessment for risk assessment purposes. So we do a lot of stuff with logs. So Python is the perfect tool to be able to parse data, be able to analyze data, and so on. The reason why I made the 27 a prerequisite is because there are a lot of concepts that will be covered in 27 that we will be using. Instead of teaching the security concept with it, I want the student to come in with the knowledge of protocols, how the network is set up, and so on, because we are going to make the tools for that. However, there was no requirement for CIS-30A in this class, but coming in after finishing 30A, it is helpful. However, we're going to spend some time to cover the basics this week for programming. So the advisory courses are 27A, 27B, which is ethical hacking, and also the forensic, and then the 40A, which is networking. And if you took the 26A and B at RCC, that will be okay. Or if you have certification, that will be okay too. If you have Security Plus, you can also qualify for the prerequisite there. And so these are the skills just coming into the course from the 27. And the next page, if you click the next button after that course information, here's my contact information. I do have various office hours, mostly in the afternoon. And I make it available on Zoom every time because I realize it's hard for students to get on campus, but they require me to be here for on-campus office hours for the students that come on campus. And so you can find the information there. So if this time doesn't work for you, make sure you drop me an email. I normally respond fairly quickly. In the case if I'm tied up doing something or I'm in a meeting, I normally respond right after that. But I like at least a couple hours buffer so I can schedule a meeting with you in case you want to make an appointment. I am available on some Fridays. I'm doing some grant stuff and have district meetings and things on Thursday and Friday. So we can make something work there. How heavy would you say CIS-30C dependent on 30B? Not so heavy. I think 30B was a lot of it was network automation and then configuring switches and routers through Python scripting. In this class, we're really looking at how to implement the use of protocols, how to look at logs, how to, investigate something using the script, how to make your own tools. So it is not truly independent, but having the knowledge is helpful. But if you have the security plus or the CIS-27 knowledge, it's definitely, that's all you need. Okay, so there's security concept, understanding what a threat would be, and so on. Cool. All right. So if you have any questions, feel free to let me know via messages, or you can pop in during my office hours. And if you come on campus, I do have cold drinks and snacks. And I already got my booster and I got tested recently, so everything is good. All right, let's look at our syllabus. Here is our syllabus. You can download it there. You're welcome. So we talked about the course description and we talked about the time. Let's take a look at the content real quick. And what I did was every semester I try to use an affordable book that's very relevant, that's a little newer. And then I would go in and update the outline of records, and the book will target all the topics that we are going to cover. So the book that we're using is the second edition, and it's by Mr. Ortega. And he has been a security engineer in the industry for a long time. So, there are a lot of practical emphasis in the book. And if you have PAC-T membership, you have access to a lot of their resources, their video and so on. I know that I bought mine for $99, and it's unlimited access for the whole year. So it's a license for the whole year and I can get access to all their books. I also use Kindle book version, so that way I have multiple options in how I could view it. So we are going to cover some of the basic this week. So we'll start with knowing how to install Python and be able to write basic program with variables using data type, list, strings, creating tuples, dictionary, and we'll get into operators using loops and conditions, if else statement, for loops. We're going to write some functions today, and then we'll get to classes, modules, and packages. I think that's where I would leave off with 30A. And then we'll get into compressions, map and lambda and zip and filter. The focus for this is to, the big picture is that, having this knowledge is going to help you customize your own tool. Having the set of tools in the security world is really important, right? Think of it like all the knowledge that you're getting is like things that you can add to your tool belt. Just like how, somebody that does carpentry would be, they would have different tools to be able to build, houses and things like that. So we would add our own tools, make our own tools, or use the industry tools. And the more tools or the more tools you can create, it just streamline the process and your work. And having that's also leveraging a lot of the jobs too. It demonstrates that and you're very, very innovative, and you'll be able to create your own set of tools and do assessment. We are going to look into class object and class relationship. I think this is a challenge area for a lot of the students to understand inheritance and things like that. But in our case, because we're using a lot of existing library that have been created, and the modules have classes like superclass and child class, we have to understand how to bring in some of the functions from those files, right? Modules are just Python files that somebody else wrote. So external modules, we can import in some of the components and be able to make sure that we can use it, so we don't have to rewrite and reinvent the wheel. We will work with controlling access, looking at files, directories, and there will be times that I would use Linux virtual machines. So if you have Linux virtual machines like Ubuntu or Kali, that will be helpful, or I can help you make it. In the past, I prefer to use Linux because Python comes equipped with Linux. If you use Mac OS, Python can be installed Mac OS. I think it's shipped in the new Mac OS with the 3.5x. You can update it to the latest version. So Mac OS is equipped with Python as well. It's just the tools are a little bit different when you download them, or the libraries are a little bit different when you download them, but you can definitely use Mac OS. And then we will work on parsing data with Python. And in this class, we're going to focus on XML, which is where we can pull a lot of the files like in CVS for Microsoft, or files from database, and then to be able to parse it. So we will work with JSON, which is part of JavaScript, and we will take a look at how we can manipulate data. And this is important because this is an area of database and lists and data content that we would see that is web oriented. And then touching back into a little bit more advanced Python programming, we will talk about how we can work with threads, how to create thread in Python, and the way that we can streamline and boost performance is to be able to either use threading or concurrent programming, where we would use parallel processing. So we can create processes or we can create thread. And Python is very dynamic in a way that we can use it for a lot of things and it can be very fast. So we will look at communication threads, concurrency, and how we can control. So we can have things that are ran parallel. We will look at processes and how to use processes and use process pooling. So if you took 30E with me, you're familiar with this because you have to do a project on it, and then looking at sub-processes. So this gets into a little bit more advanced Python programming a little bit. And then we're going to come back to assessment in the security area. So we would work with Nmap. And if you've used Nmap before, you might be familiar with a section on the interface where you can actually enter the script. So we would use Nmap for output. And then we would use the module. It's open source, so we can use the module to be able to work with Python. And then looking into ports, services, driver scanning, those are some of the areas that touch back into system impact. And then we will get into cross-site scripting. So XSS stands for cross-site scripting attack. And then how some of these type of attacks can be detected by Python, and it also can be scripted in Python. And then we'll look into cross-site request forgery, so CSRF. And then for detection, click hijacking and SSL stripping. So this is, a lot of it is web oriented. So we wanted to look at the SSL, secure socket layer, and how that is related to, the sessions, and how a session can be hijacked or click hijacked. And then we'll get into crawlers, fuzzing, buffer overflow, reverse engineering. And so in some of the malicious intention area and looking at applications assessment area, and then dive into reverse shell and LFI. So we will look at some web-based vulnerability. As you know, that most of our application in the business world, right, or even the personal world, is web-oriented, because it's just saving resources, it's easily managed, it's centralized. So what we would have to do is we would have to build this knowledge to be able to support it down the line as security professional. And then how we can use PyMist to create threat intelligence. And it has a scoring system where we would be able to create the scoring algorithm, so we can look at which threat is highly critical compared to something that is not critical. And then the ultimate area where we get paid is going to be the reporting, how that reports can play into solutions. So parsing and be able to generate reports. Nessus is a tool for vulnerability assessment, and Nmap is, that it can be used for scanning from a network standpoint for protection to see what is, open, what is available, and so on. And so those are the two type of tools that we can integrate reports and data parsing. And then I make this a project for 30A to preview for some of the security students. I know that there are a lot of tutorial videos available for Keylogger nowadays, but we would use the IO library to be able to read input from hardware like keyboard and so on. So we can look at how Keylogger program would work. And then the next area is going to be forensic. So we'll look at PyFish, and a lot of this forensic is about seeking and finding information or events or incidents. So we would need to be able to understand how to do evidence extraction and use p-search and p-image. And because if you took 27A, when you gather evidence, you don't examine the drives or the storage or the system that you pull from evidence. You actually take an image of it and you study that image, because you don't want to change and modify any kind of timestamp and the integrity of that system or that storage. So we'll take a look at how we can extract evidence, and go through the forensic process, looking at time module for timestamp, and then how to be able to look at socket and so on. So using Python is very, very versatile. And then working with rainbow and cloud. So it sounds like a kid song, right? But we will touch on the cloud portion as the last part. Okay, any questions? So this class is pretty fun. It lets you examine other area from the development world, and get into some of the security things that we probably already know as we took 27. So here is the learning outcomes again, and the course information, and this is the textbook I'm using. So if you transfer to like National University, I think I articulated with them for this course, and I was trying to work on Cal Baptist and other university. But if you provide your transcript, I can give you the syllabus. You can provide that to the institution that you're transferring it to. And if it meets their criteria, they can actually do course-to-course transfer directly with you. We try to set up articulation agreement, and it does take sometimes, like CSU, it takes like a year and a half for things to go through. So all right, so use the second edition. If you have the first edition, I think there's a slight change in the version and some of the tools that he's using, and you know that in the technical world, sometimes some tools go away. Like if you use Kali, you would see that their library is always changing, or their tool sets is always changing. Okay. So I organize all my content as module, and think of each module as like a unit. And so we would start with unit 1, and we would go all the way to maybe 14. I will do like final review around week 14, give you week 15 to wrap up things, and then take the test in week 16. I do take late work every week that it's late. It will be 10% deducted from the overall grade. I like not to take anything above 3 weeks, but in the case of urgent matters or things that you cannot prevent, just communicate with me and I'm flexible. I'll work with you. Okay. And we will do assignments together when we meet, mostly on Monday or the first part of the week. And then we also do the lab on the second part of the week together. Okay. There will be a course project. So I am still trying to, I think I'm going to be more flexible, like what I did with 30E. You can advance an existing project that you've been working on, or you can look into some of the learning areas. So you can build a forensic tool with what you have learned in this class, or you can get a little bit more into, monitoring, scanning, or web-based assessment, application assessment. I'm going to let you pick your poison. But as long as you meet the basic criteria that I would list, you should be fine. Okay, so I will release the project about week 9 or 10, and that will give you a month and a half to work on it. Then we would have periodic quizzes, maybe 3. I think I had set it up for this class, 3 quizzes. We will have 1 final exam. I do use lockdown browser with no webcam. I know students talk about lockdown browser, but I have to find a way to control online class examination. So because for our accreditation and all of that, we have to fulfill the integrity part of assessment. So I want to make sure that you're not finding just the answer by Googling your answer, but it comes from what you have learned and you apply your learning. And quizzes close on Sunday at 11:59 p.m. or by the due date. Usually it's just Sunday, and you have 3 attempts for the quiz. I normally do quiz review with the game, and so you can earn extra credit or get a gift card. Online participation. The way I look at participation is if you complete the task that's asked of you for the week, you participate in class. In the case if you need help, ask questions, that's fine. As long as the task is completed and you fulfill your requirement, that will be fine. I will give you the participation credits as necessary. So it ties to your assignments and things that we do together. extra credit is going to be weighted at the end. I normally add into the area that you are deficient in. So if the student got 100% on everything and that student got a B on the final exam, I will put the extra credit into the final exam. So I individually look at how each student's performed throughout, and for the deficient area, that's where I would add, and it never exceeds the 10%. So it helped lift up a little bit. So for example, last night I was wrapping up my Java class grade. One of the students, this student was like at borderline between a B and an A. So by a few percent, and that really helped lift the grade a little bit. So, but don't think of it as, if you skip a whole grade category, like if you don't do a project, it will drop your grade by at least 1 letter grade. Okay, so just keep in mind. And that's what's next here. So very much like the 30A, the grade category is the same. So your quizzes is about, it's 15% of your grade. Assignments and participation is 30%. Your lab exercises are 20%. So there will be, about 14 or 13 lab exercises, and that will weight out to be 20%. Your course project will be 15%. And I always do things in parts because I don't like to do one assignment for all your course project, because if you miss one part, you miss everything. So, I would do documentation and assessment and also your program itself. So it will be broken into at least 2 parts or 3 parts. And then your final exam is 20%. So altogether, that's 100% of your grade. And your grade scale is listed above. I don't do pluses or minuses. I follow the regular community college standard guidelines. So 90 to 100% is an A, B is 80 to 89, C is 70 to 79, a D is 60 to 69, and 59 and below is an F. Now, objective is to get a good grade in this class, right? And so if you complete all the tasks that's required, likely that you would have a strong grade in this class. There will be opportunity for extra credit to help with your grade, like I said. However, can't rely 100% on extra credit. And then the rest is just your policy for code of conduct, just to be mindful and be sensitive to, other people that's in the course room. And I just abide by the college policy. There's also student grievance policy in the case if you have issues. If I can address it, please bring it forward to me, but you can definitely fill out the grievance complaint form, and that goes to the Dean of Student Services and possibly Dean of Instructions if it's related to faculty and, other students and so on. And then attendance policy, if a student doesn't do anything, right, doesn't show up, that student can likely be dropped. Now, from a faculty standpoint, I'm going to be clear because I know that some student asked me to drop somewhere in the middle of the semester. I don't have the flexibility to drop people at any time. What will happen is I do have a period of time that I drop people. And so I have to wait for that window to open, and then I drop the students. So if the student missed class continuously, I reserve the right to drop the student, but it doesn't always happen right away. Now, if the student decides to drop the class, that student needs to drop the class within the timeline. Otherwise, the consequences would be a W, which impacts your financial aid. Or, at the end, if the student doesn't really do anything or submit anything, I can give that student an FW, which is a fail with the withdrawal. So it changes a little bit with the financial aid from what they told me, or simply receive an F if the grade is below 59%. But I like not for that to happen. If you need help or have questions, or if you're struggling or having challenges, please communicate with me. And I think we talked a little bit about behavior issues, disruptions, any kind of, conflicts. Just be aware and then also bring that up to me. And so if I can address it, I will help you be sensitive to people's feelings and not be offensive to others. Okay. Do your own work. I did catch a few people trying to submit other people's source code this week. So, I follow the policy for cheating and zero tolerance for cheating. I know that, this sounds tough, but in this industry, you have to have integrity and accountability for your work. So don't copy and paste other people's work. If you do use open source, which is fine, just make sure that you document it, right? Make sure that, when you're using GitHub, give the credit where it's due. It's fine to use other developers' tools and then be customizing it, but you have to acknowledge that and get permissions to use their tool and so on. Okay. And sometimes you have to email them and ask for permission to use their source code anyway. For accessibility, if you need a special accommodation, here's the contact information. You can visit the page or you can stop by the campus, go to the DSS office. And once the request is filed, they will send me the letter once that's approved, and then I would fulfill what's required on that letter. Okay, sometimes like extended test time or, whatever accommodation is needed. And then my contact information and my office hours is there. Okay. Any question? All right. So that is the syllabus. Let me go back to modules here. Okay. So I mostly use Office 365. You do have a free license as a student. Your textbook is right here. Just a, let me show you this. So when I was planning for this course a while back, I actually wanted to use this book. There's some interesting exercises and concept that is covered in that. This book is not required. This is our textbook, but if you do get a chance, you should check out this book. And it also talks about how you can integrate ethical hacking skills. So this is really for pen testing. And then this has everything. Okay. So if you want to do more pen testing, also check out that book. And if you get Kindle version, I think it's like $17 or something like that. Not too expensive. College resources. So in the case if you need tutorial services, and check out the calendar for the timeline. Office 365 information is there. And then if you have questions, you can post that here. I do check out the discussion thread sometime when I see the notification, and I will address the questions. You can also answer student questions as well. Okay. So I know in all my classes, the students, sometimes they set up Discord channel or Slack to be able to communicate with each other. You can do that if you wanted to work in the class with other students. It's not necessary or required. Okay, so this is my plan. I like to follow this for most part. I will update this and modify it. There is a spring break in the second week of April, so we will implement that accordingly. And then, so that's just a projection for your tasks for the weeks. Okay, so for today, we are going to work on notes and we are going to do some basic programming. So download the notes, part 1. And then for the part 2, I'll upload that shortly. I had a class right before this one, like 25 minutes before this one starts. So I didn't get a chance to upload everything, but I will get that up and then we will use the part 2 for the lab this week. Okay, download this and the assignment. So that's what we're covering next. Let me close this. Okay, any question before we start? All right, we should have an hour and a half, so that should take care of the 9 exercises easily. Okay, so in this class, we would start with data structure and basic Python programming first. I see a chat. The Python certification from Microsoft, is there some kind of prep questions from somewhere? I did have access to Certiport, MTA, Microsoft has a bunch of different certification. I gotta see if they still have that component for C++, Python, and JavaScript practice tests in there. I heard that they kind of did away with that with Certiport. So we are in the process of renewing the license for 2022 because it just expired at the end of January. So I know that they put the requisition up. So as soon as I can get the license in my hand, I'll check it out. I'll let you know. If it has the practice exam, then I will give you the access code to be able to do that. I do also use skill sets online, which has some certification. So if you, sorry to sidetrack real quick. I know I showed this to some of you already. This one is like a library thing. It gives you access for 2 weeks and then I can renew your access. So it has all of these along with more. So I can give you just send me an email. I can give you access to this. So there's certifications on here that is Python related. Okay. So, but yeah, Microsoft ones, I have to see if I have the review tool for you. Okay, so your source code for the book, you can get that from GitHub. I put that here. So if you wanted to get some of the source code for from the example in the book, you can download it. Okay, so if you have never used Python before, you need to download Python and the link is located here. I believe that the current version is the 3.10. Right? Or you can simply search. So if you don't know, you can go Python download, right? And then now, if you use Mac, you simply click on that, right? If you use Linux, use that. You use Windows, you can go here, right? So 3.10 is okay. If you use 3.7 and up, that should be all right. I think I have 3.9 on mine. Now, as you read the notes, once you download and install, if you have like the older version, so what happens is it will put it in a specific directory, but when you use the wizard, make sure that there's a ticker box or the checkbox that you need to select system path configuration. Otherwise, it doesn't link it with your system path, your system variables. And so you have to set that up. And so that means that it doesn't default to anything that's Python related if you don't have the system variable path set up. Now, once you download, you would have idle. Okay, so if you don't install, you're gonna have something like mine. See how there's 3.7 and 3.9. Now, idle is the default, right? IDE, which is integrated development environment. This is where you would use the application. It's an application where you can write and run your code. Okay. Every language would have some related IDE. It's not necessarily come with it. Python has idle that's built with it. Okay. And the version of your Python is always shown with the idle here. Now, when you open up idle, this is a shell, and shell is used to be able to test like line by line. It can also do calculation, right? So, but this is not where you would write your code, okay? Where you write your code is where you would click File, New File, and this is going to open up your text editor, okay? And then this is where you would be able to write your code. Okay. I also use Tawny. I think most of you took my 30A. So Tawny is an IDE that would that allows you to write your code. This is the text editor part, and this is the shell part. So all IDE is, it's a way that you can create your program by writing it using a text editor. And then you can use the interpreter to run your program and output it to shell. So the shell for Tawny is below, and you can move this up and down. You can configure it and so on. Now, sometimes you would see that we would use directly in command line and the text editor like Nano or Vim in Linux to be able to, make a file, edit it, and run it real quick. So we would do it that way as well. Okay, but I recommend using an IDE. If you're familiar with Visual Studio, you can check out how to set up Python for Visual Studio Code, which is free. Or if you use like an online IDE, that's fine. So I have a page that talks about IDE, and I put some links on there for you. So if you wanted to download Tawny, I think Tawny is compatible with all platforms. So there's different version of it you can download. Okay, so use an IDE, and then if not, if you like Linux, you can use Linux, and you can use like Sublime with Linux, which is a text editor with the package. So there are many ways that you can write a program, or Notepad++, etc. Okay, do not use version 2.7 because it's no longer supported. The syntax between version 2 and version 3, there are quite, different in syntax and also supporting tools and features. So make sure that we use 3.7 and up. Okay, so that answers the first question. Let me get mine. So for question number 1, what version of Python should be downloaded and installed for this course? Which version of Python is no longer supported? There should be a question mark, sorry. So we would use 3.7x or newer. So if you download 3.8, 3.9, or 3.10, that's okay. We don't want to use 2.7 because 2.7 is no longer supported. They discontinued that a couple years ago. Some companies still use 2.7 or 2.5 even, but having the 3.5 knowledge or newer, like 3.7 knowledge, you should be fine. Any question? Okay, so let's touch on a little bit on the benefits. So why are we learning Python for cybersecurity? What's so important, right? Like we said, many tools are written in Python. Many open source tools are written in Python. It is a language that can be used for multi-platform, meaning that you can write a program that works for Windows, Linux, and Mac OS. It's easy, simple, fast, robust. It is a powerful language. It is object-oriented. And the great thing about Python that I love so much is abundant amount of libraries. Okay. These files were created by developers in the community and shared with other developers so we could use it. Like the Nmap module that has already been created. So you don't have to start from scratch. You can incorporate other modules and packages to be able to build out your projects. I love also the fact that they have great documentation and example. So Python tools usually have great documentation. So before you start using the tool, make sure that you read the documentation, look at how it should be implemented, because the developers, they put together a guide for you on where to start, how to start, and be able to, build out or test your program. You can write a few lines of code and it can achieve a lot of things. Like in network, we can automate a lot of things. We can write a few lines and we can set up configuration for all our switches. You can also use it to prototype or proof of concept. Python is great for that. So to answer the next question, we can highlight some of the things, and you don't have to put it all for verbatim, or you can copy and paste it. That's fine. So I just simply include what are listed on the bullets there. So having the Python knowledge on your resume, right, on your LinkedIn profile, it is helpful because, like, for example, Robert Half apprenticeship, they really look for not beginning level apprenticeship. They want somebody that comes into like close to mid-level for apprenticeship. So somebody that has versatility in programming and also IT configuration, network configuration. So some jobs would have this type of requirement. So when you get to like network engineer and security engineer area, a lot of times you have to understand how scripting works. And some company, they also use shell script, right? Okay, question? So with that question number 2, you can find that on page 1 of our notes. So what's the big deal about version 3 compared to version 2? So we see that Unicode is supported with your standard library for like strings and type. And also the input functions has been renewed, so it's a lot easier to do input compared to the older version. There's restructuring with the modules on how you can customize module and use external module. Async IO library is fully supported with the standard library. And for those of you who took 30E, you know what this is. But for you, those who didn't, right? Async IO library is used for asynchronous programming. It's a way that we can boost performance writing concurrent program. So we can take tasks and make it, parallel. We can make it run concurrently so it's faster. Because in a sequential program, like what you would normally see when you write a program in, today or in 30A, that it would execute based on the function call, one call after the next. So the interpreter would take that and sequentially go through it. But with async IO, what we can do is we can create a group of processes, or we can also use threading. But we can create a group of processes and we can have those processes overlapping or running at the same time, because our processor now are multi-core. So we can dedicate, one core to a certain task and we can run the core concurrently. And that allows us to do multitasking. And when you're running monitoring systems or when you're scanning, a lot of time, it takes up a lot of resources, right? For communication, it has to do a lot of discovery. So your processor and memory allocation is in consideration. Then you would also see that your exception handling is better in the version 3. We're going to talk about that this week as well. Now, Python, you can use what's called the virtual development environment, where you would use virtual env. This you can access it directly, activate it directly in command line and be able to write it. So it would take an area of your memory and allocate that to the virtualization process of it. So it doesn't really impact, right, some of the directory and the other storage. So that way you can use it to test. And this comes standard with the distribution now. Okay, so we'll play with that too. Some of you've seen that before. Any question? All right, so let's take a look at the next exercise. We're going to do some programming. So for number 3, we are going to write a short little program, a script. We are going to declare a variable, and we are going to initialize that variable with our full name, which is a string. And we are going to display our full name, and we're going to take a screenshot of that. So a variable simply is a reserved memory location that you identify and give it a name. It is used to store a value. And in our case, we are going to store a group of characters, which is a string. And that group of characters represent our full name. And a variable can store a number, an integer. A variable can store a character like A or C. Or a variable can also store a decimal number, $1.99. So there are many different types. And the cool thing about Python is it is not a strongly typed language. So you don't have to specify what kind of data type it is. So with that said, you need to name your variable with a unique name. It cannot be a reserved keyword. So stay away from the reserved keyword. Okay, there's a, those keywords represent something in the library, the standard library. So you don't want to use the keyword. You should always start your variable name with an alphabet character. And I normally lowercase mix with uppercase for the second word, or you can also use underscore to separate it. You can also use number, but never start with the number. Okay. So here I have an example. Student underscore name is the variable name. That's how I declare it. And then Sandra is the string. And in Python, you can use double quotation mark or a single quotation mark. So once you declare a variable, basically you would take a location in the memory and you identify it. So you gave it a name. And the system sees this. All it is going to take a memory address and it's going to tie it to this name. And then after that, we are going to put the string Sandra into that space, that memory location. So when we access it, we would simply tell it to go there, get that data, and display it by doing print. So print method show on the screen, right, the content of your variable or your container. Okay, so for number 3, what we will do is, I have it written already. Hold on 1 second. I think you can see that okay. I don't know if it's small. All right, so you can start with a variable name. And you can say my name or name, that's okay. And you would use the equal sign and then put the string in a single quotation mark or double quotation mark. I like to use the single quotation mark. So I say my name is, so you initialize that variable there, and then you would put Casey went. And then once we declare the variable, we would then print it, display it. So we would say print, and since it is a function or a method, right, it's a built-in method that comes with the standard library, you would simply pass that variable inside the parentheses. And so after that, we can simply run. Let's see. Okay, so now we can run it. So once you have those 2 statements, then you can display your full name. So I can also do student name is, right, John Smith, like this. And then I can do a print student name. Pretty easy, 2 lines. So in this exercise, we accomplish using the string. We declare our variable and we initialize it with the string. Then we use the print method to display. Any question? Easy? Okay, so once you have that written, okay, and you run it, so the interpreter is gonna give you the output of your full name, take a screen capture and paste it for number 3. I need to see your code and your output like that. And you can use idle or you can use Tawny or IDE of your choice, okay? Now, can I write this in Notepad and run it in command line? You sure can. Just gotta go to the location where you save the file, right? If you set up your system variable path correctly, you should be able to issue Python command and then run the file. So you can definitely do it in command line. Everything that all programming language, I think, even for the C compiler and even Java, right? You can do everything in command line. Okay, ready to tackle the next one? A little harder. Okay, so with that, we would see how to work with a variable. Let me, I have so many things open here. All right, so you can refer to that example. And the next type is going to be list. So when we say type, list is also a data type. It is a container. Now, compared to a variable can only hold one item, right? Like one string, one number, one character. A list, it can hold a group of items, and it is a sequential data structure. So it is a group, and the way that you can access the data is you can go to the index for each of the items. So the way that you declare a list is you would use a square brace or a square bracket. And for each of the item, you would use a separator, which is a comma. Now, the cool thing about Python is that you can have mixed type in a list, where C++, because it's strongly typed, you have, if you specify that it's an integer, you can only store integer in that array. So a list is equivalent to array in C++ and Java. But for Python, it is flexible where it just allocate a space for you and you can put in any data you like. So I can have string mixed with numbers, right? Text mixed with numbers. I can have characters mixed with float or decimal values. Just making sure that you need to separate each of the item or element by a comma, which is a comma separated value for the item. Now, the way that we access each of the item from the left to the right, you would start with the index 0. So think of it that item exists in that slot, and that slot is a 0. First is 0, second is index 1, third is index 2, fourth is index 3. Now, if you access it from the right to the left, we would start with the -1 from the last item on the list. So if I have 100 items, the most right one is going to be -1, and then you're going to increment by 1 going to the left side. Okay, so you can do it either way. You can go from left to right or right to left by using the index value, and you would put that index value in the square brace. So that way the system would know that you are trying to access that element at that index location. So I took this example and then I put it in the table so you can see. So your index left to right and then right to left. Any question? So now let's do the next one, number 4. We're asked to write a Python that we need to declare a list and it contains network devices. You are going to use common methods. These are pre-created built-in methods that already exist, used from the standard library. And we are going to add device to the list, take one device from the list. We're going to add a tuple, and we'll talk about a tuple. And we are going to use extend and append. I know this is review for many of you, but let's do it so it jogs our memory. So below the example, you would see append. So when you use append is a function. A function is basically an execution task. You tell the system that I want to add one item to the list. So in this example, we have a list and it contains apple, banana, and cherry. And we're trying to add orange to it. So you can append one more item to this list. And when you print it after that, it's going to add the orange. It's going to add that in. Okay. So append is used to add one item to the list. You can also use insert. And the way we use insert here is we actually can point to a certain location to add a certain item. So if you want to squeeze the orange in between banana and apple, you can do that. You can make the orange the second element by putting in its index and what its value would be. Okay. So we can use insert to actually add it to a specific location or a position. So you see some example there. You can also add a group of elements by using extend. And we can do one list added to another list. So for example, if you set up one segment of the network and you have another segment of the network and you're trying to combine all the devices onto one list, you can take one list and you can extend another list. Now, when we're dealing with small network, that can be easy. What if we have thousands of devices and lots of segments? Well, we can have a script that automatically do that for us. So the benefit of this is knowing how to use already pre-made built-in methods that simplify your life, where you don't have to write things from scratch. So ideally, right, back in the day, traditionally, we would take a loop and then we just, add it in one by one. But Python already have the iterative functionality with these built-in methods for us. Okay, so it takes a group and it just put it in, it adds it to the end. So here you can see they take one list and they add it with another list and it's going to combine these two in one. Okay. And then I want to go over a couple more to preview and then we'll do the exercise. Index. We can use this, sorry, it's such item. We can use this to identify, right, the index, the position of a certain value. Okay, we can tell it, I'm looking for this. Where is it in that list? Okay, so we can find the actual element location of that particular value, cherry. Then we can also remove. If you want to get rid of an item on the list, you can tell it to remove. And then we, push and pops and other things. So there are others that we don't cover, and you can refer to their documentation. This is Python to be able to use. Okay, so I'll leave this up. I'm gonna go back to our exercise now, as some of you probably got started. So the first thing that we need to do is we are going to create a list. You can put different elements in there. Then we're going to add a device to the list. Okay. And then we're going to remove the first device, and then we're going to add the tuple. Okay. Using extend and append. So let's do 4. I hope you can see this okay. Let me see if I can configure. Oh, is it under options? Let me increase the font. Oh, it's too big. Maybe 13. Yep, that's good. All right. I forgot to save it. Okay. All right. So let me clear this. Okay, so let's start with a list of our network devices. So I only have like 3 on here. Okay. So I would start with the name of my list, network devices is, and then the square bracket. And because they are device name or even model, I wanted to make it, there are strings. Okay, so I would have, let's say Cisco 1, Fortinet 10, Linksys 07. You can make these up. You don't have to stick to exactly what I have, but I try to be a little bit more realistic, right, on how we would name these. So once I declare the list and have a few of my network devices, and remember, we're going to use the comma to separate each of them, then I would print it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to comment this out. And the way that you use comment is the interpreter is going to ignore it if you put the 3 single quotation mark or double quotation mark, or you can do each line by using the hashtag. So it won't run that line. Okay. So I'm only going to run these 2 lines right now. Okay. So network devices, and we are going to list the item in our list. So once I initialize those, the system, they would see it. It would give me here the 3 strings. Okay. Any question? Now for step B, we are going to use append method to add 1 more item to our existing list. So I have 3 things on the list here. I'm going to add another one. So with that, I simply use the append method. So what you have to do is you have to bring down the list name and use the dot operator and then the append method, and you simply pass the value of what you're trying to add. So here I just say Linksys 8. 1 more item to this list. And then I wanted to print so I can see the update. So let's run this again. So every time that you change your program, you need to save and run. So my original list have 3 things. I append 1 more. I have 4 things now. Then once we have our 4 things, we want to get rid of the first item, which is the Cisco here, by using remove, right? So we're at step C. We're here. Okay. So we are going to remove the first device. And in this case, I'm going to use remove. And I simply make sure that that string that I'm using is matching with that name of the the item there, right? The same exact string is used. Okay. You can make it a variable and pass it with a variable, but since we already declared it here, we just pull it and put it up there. So I want to get rid of Cisco 1. So I'm going to use the remove method. And just like the other one, you use a dot operator. So you bring down the list name, dot operator, and then use the remove method. And then put the string inside the parentheses. And then print. So when I run this, let me clear this so I can run it again for you. So I start with the list with 3. I added 1 more. I got rid of the first one. So Cisco is now gone. So I left with Fortinet, Linksys 7, and Linksys 8. So that's how you can use remove method. Any question? Then once I have C completed, I would move on to the next step. Now the next step tells us that you have another group of items and you want to merge them, right? You want to combine them onto one list. Now the difference between list and tuple is that, yep, the tuple, you cannot modify it after it's created. So the tuple use the parentheses, okay, and the list use the square bracket. If you need to change the tuple content, right, you have to either convert it to a list or nest it into the list. But it stays in, once it's in the tuple, you cannot modify it. Okay. So for question 4, in B, after we remove it, C, we are going to make a tuple. So we're going to declare a tuple, and it gave us sec1 switch. That's going to be your segment 1 switch is netgear 04 and netgear 05. Be careful copy and pasting from Word over to your IDE because the symbol doesn't translate well. So retype the quotation mark, comma, and things, because I know quotation mark doesn't do well in Tawny and idle. So, you know, retype the symbol, okay? And for C, we are going to use extend. I want you to see how extend is different than append. Okay. So in C, we first have to declare this part, which is given to us already as a tuple. And then we simply use extend to be able to add it to our existing list. Fortinet, Linksys 7 and 8, right? So here we are going to declare the tuple that's given to us in 4C. So I can simply say sec1 switch is netgear 04 and netgear 05. And I want to extend it. So I'm going to add this into my list here. Okay. So that's simply 3 lines. You have to say which list you're adding to. Okay. And once you declare the tuple, you bring it down here and put it into the parentheses. You're using it by putting it into the argument. Okay. So let's clear this and run it again. So the last thing it did was it added these for me. So it took it out of the tuple and it puts it into the list. So when you do extend, right, it took what was declared here, the content, and it adds it to my existing list, which is Fortinet, Linksys 07 and Linksys 08. So it makes it longer by adding those last 2 elements. Any question? So that was C. Now we're going to do the last part, which is D. So now after we extend, we are going to append. Since we already declared here, we don't have to do it again because it already exists in the program. We only have to do it once. Then what we will need to do is we just need to write the append statement and print it again. So I simply replace extend with append for the next statement because I already have the tuple declare in the program. Then I simply pass it in the parameter of, or the argument of append. Here is where, okay. So when you append it as a tuple, it kept it as a tuple, it just nested, it puts it inside the list as a tuple. When you extend it, it puts it into the list as just elements. Any question?
Just to clarify, so extend, we'll keep it as a tuple, but
No, extend takes it out of the tuple and it combines it. It just combine it as element items or values into the list.
So when you convert it into a list?
Yeah. When you run extend, it puts it into the list itself. But when you do append, it keeps it as a tuple and it nests it inside that list.
Oh, okay, got it. Thank you.
Yep. Now, the benefit of having extend is that when you're merging things, right? After I extend it, I can sort it. But if you append, these 2 items here that's in the tuple cannot be sorted because they are static. Once you initialize the tuple, it stays the same. You cannot change the value inside it. You cannot switch them around. Okay. So when you sort, you have to reorganize the item in the indices, right? So if you want to sort or modify, you want to stick with the list, not the tuple. So extend is more ideal. But if you want something that stays the same, that won't be modified, you would use the tuple, and append allows you to be able to do that. Okay, so you see the difference there. Programming is about how to, right, put data into a certain memory location and access it and be able to, create certain processes for certain things, certain tasks, purpose. Any question? Okay. So that takes care of number 4. We have about 40 minutes. If I don't hit all the questions, we will finish in the next session, but I will have these recordings up tonight. So if you need to go back and watch it again, you can. Okay, so that was 4. Take a screenshot once you have that completed. Now, the purpose of doing number 5 is I want to show you how you can use documentation and be able to apply concept from documentation in programming. I think some of my students are lacking this skill, even though they've taken programming classes. So we want to refer to documentation, and we want to take the methods that's stated in the format or the syntax that's used, and then we want to apply it. Okay, so for number 5, just to overview, we are going to do a sort of our list. We can use the list where we left off with extend, okay, in number 4. However you want to make a list there too, you can do that. We also want to use a count method. So we're going to use a sort method. We're going to use a count method. We're going to use index method for C. And we're going to use the index value in displaying the content for D. And we are going to do insert, okay, along with reverse and clear. The reason why I spend time on this is because down the line, you are going to have to access and parse data. So I want you to understand how to work with containers and built-in methods in order to make your life a little bit easier. You can make it read to you. You can, sort it. And then, once you understand scripting, things are a lot easier. You don't have to granularly do a lot of stuff in IT. It's great. All right. So let's work on number 5. Let me close 3 and I will open 5. So I'm going to clear this. So like the other one, I'm going to comment out some of the sections so it doesn't confuse you. And we'll go step by step. Okay, so we will start with, since it's a different program, I didn't want to go back to here, but you can add on to it, okay? So I started with declaring a list. So I have network devices and I wanted to use, in this case, all 5 items. So Fortinet, Linksys, 7, 8, Netgear, 4, and 5. And the first thing I wanted to do for A is I want to sort it. Okay. Now keep in mind that these are strings, so it's going to alphabetize it. And as you see, this is already sorted, right? So you might not see a different, but let's say if I throw something else in here, let me do something else first. Let's do, let's try with, no, I wanted to do, let's add a second item here. Let's do ASA. $500. So we have another one. So I want you to see the difference there. Okay. So let's say that we have this, so you can list other type of devices. So this is still Cisco, right? But notice that now I'm not pre-sorted. Okay, I have F and A and L and L and N and N. So I wanted to alphabetize this now. So it's going to do an ascending sort by using a sort pre-built method. So we are going to execute the sort now. So notice that this was behind Fortinet And after I sort it, it's going to throw that to the first element. So it's going to reorganize it and bring ASA to the front and then push everything back. Okay. So once I sort it, I won't see anything until I print it, right? So just like the other method, you simply do the list name and then sort. So if you look at their documentation, it tells you how to use it there. See? So sort is here. And this helps us organize our data so that way we can quickly find something, right? In the case that you have lots and lots, you can alphabetize them this way. If you're using strings, it's simply just use the first character to alphabetize, that is. Then what I wanted to do was, let's say that you have the same devices like Android, right? You can count up the number of the same type of devices or the same name. Okay. So what I wanted to do was, let's say that I wanted to find Netgear 05, right? Because sometimes the same name can cause conflict on the network if we accidentally name it the same name, right? So we wanted to identify what that is. And so you can use count to be able to find how many times that string comes up. So for the next step, we are going to do count. So we want to count Netgear 05 in the list. And this time I didn't do it like two statement. I did it all in one, and you can do it that way. You can nest into the print. Sometimes, you know, data doesn't pass through correctly when you have like a big container, like a list or a tuple. You have to use like a variable and then we'll pull it from the variable or a list. But here you can nest it into a print method. So I have a method inside another method. So I simply put it into one statement. Just make sure that I have the parentheses, right? If I open two, I gotta close two. So I have print network devices dot count, and then what I want to count, that string, Netgear 05. So let's run it. So it tells me that it comes up one time. And that's correct. And this is helpful when you deal with large logs too, right? So we can find way to search for things, sort things, and keep our data organized. We can quickly use that for identifying certain issues. Now, in the next step, we are going to, okay, so I did that, B. Now I'm working on C. I wanted to look at the index, which is the item location in that list, where it stores Netgear 04. Okay. So here I am going to return. I am going to return the index of Netgear 04. Now, you got to be careful with this one because unlike the other one, if you nest it into the print like what I did in the previous step, it's going to give you none as output. Because when you do this, you can also put it into a variable. That variable holds the value of the index, and then you will be able to print it. So I want to show you that you can take a variable and store the outcome of this method, which is of a number, right? It's going to look at Netgear 04. Where is it at? It's right here, right? So it should give me 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So it should be 4 as the output. So it's going to take that 4 and put it into the variable and then print from that variable. So what I did was I just used a variable in order to do that. And so you can do it that way. You can allocate another space, store the return value from the index method, and then print it and pull it from the variable to print. Okay. So run this again. So we would have 4. So how is this relevant, right? We can also identify where it is on the list to quickly find, or in the case where if we have certain things to be sequential by order, we would say, okay, it's the 4th one in that network area. Any question? All right. So we did C. Now we're going to do D. We are going to display the last item using the index on that list. So earlier in the notes, it shows you, right? If you come back to here, that we can go from left to right or right to left. So the last index can be -1 or the value of that last, you just count, okay? So let's come back to our program. If I wanted to print this right here, okay? So if I go from left to right, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, right? Or if I go from the right, it'll just be -1 as an index. Last one is always going to be -1. So I did it 2 times to show you that it could be done either way. So to display the last item on the list, you can do a print and your list name, and then you simply put the index value in the square bracket, which is -1. Or we can go from left to right, just count from 0 to that last item, that will be 4. So I can do a print, your list name, and then put the index in the square bracket, and that will be 4. So let me clear this out. Okay, so I'm going to run this now. Sorry, it should be 5, right? Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, 0. Yep, 5. Sorry, I miscounted. I had changed, I had added earlier, so let's do that again. My mistake. Okay, so it should be 5 because there's 6 items on the list now. I added 1 earlier. So be -1 or 5. Just count from left to right, and whatever that number is, starting from 0. And the last item, that's going to be your index. So I have 05 and 05. Netgear 05 for both. That one. Okay. Any question? So that's how you can use index. You can also do a group. Okay. So if I wanted to do a range, differences. Let's say I wanted to go from the second one to the last one. Actually, before the last one, so that will be the last one. There you go. Two. So you can do it with the range using the colon this way. Just use index. So what that is called slicing, or you can slice the list into a smaller list. It's just going to access. So all it is going to go to the memory location and pull the data and present to you the group of data that you're asking for, which is from the second item to the last item. Notice that I'm not using 5 here because it's going to have to pass the 5 in order to access it. So it's going to end it with 6. So we have to put from 1 to 6. So it needs to access the 5th or the 6th item, the 5th index. So that's why you have to go one over. Okay, second to last. This is not required. I just want to show you. You can do that. Okay, next step. We are going to do. So we did D. Now we are going to insert link sys 12 at the 3rd index or the 4th item on the list. So we are going to squeeze it in the middle. Okay. Did I do that one? Oh, I didn't have that there. Okay, so when you look at your documentation here, right? Remember that we talked about how we can use insert. So simply you would use list name dot insert and then the location and then the value. Okay, so you can insert it in the front of the list. You can also append it, but append would just add it to the last part of the list. So here we have to go to a certain, given a certain position. The first argument is the index of the element before which to insert. Okay. So we can do print network devices dot insert. And what do we say that was? The 3rd index. So 3 sys 12. I'm going to close that. Yeah. Okay. Do you know why I'm getting none here? Because when you nest it like this, it's not going to print like I said earlier. Okay. So what I need to do is I need to make it insert. And then I'm going to print out the updated list. So once it's inserted, it's already added that element there. So we are going to do a print network devices. Let's clear this. See, it's no longer showing none because if you nest it into the print, it's going to lose its value because it's trying to do it and access it. So insert it first and then print it. Print the list after it's already updated. So it updated it by adding the element already. and then you're going to print it again. So now I have one more, right? Link says 12 is here. Now it's no longer sorted. So if I wanted to sort it, I can sort it again and then print it. And you can apply conditions too, right? Like after it's inserted, then you can specify that it can go through the sort again and then display. Any question? Yeah, sometime when you nest methods inside the methods, especially in a large container, it won't be able to access that. So you want to take the method out and use it separately. Okay, so that was step E. And then we want to reverse it and then clear it. So to do reverse, we simply, again, like what I did with insert, I wanted to keep it not nested in the print method. Otherwise, it's going to give you none because it can't access it. So we want to use the list name and we want to reverse it. So all that is going to access the data opposite way. It won't change anything in the memory because they're already there. It's just the way that it's going to pull your data and present to you is the opposite. And then we are going to print. So reverse it and then print. Do not nest it into the print. You're going to get none. Oh, wait, sorry. I forgot to take the second part out here. Let me hold on to the clear and do that last. Clear this. All right. So as I did the insert, right, now I'm going to swap it around. So I'm going to switch the list around where Netgear become first. So I did the reverse there. Okay, and ASA is going to be last. So now it is the opposite of what I had. It's not completely descending because we didn't sort it correctly or we didn't have it sorted in the last step. So, but it is the opposite of what we had. So the list in reverse. And then lastly, now we want to get rid of everything, right? Dismantle all our devices now. So we are going to clear, and clear is really easy. You just pass, or you just use the dot operator with the clear method and then print it. It should show an empty list. So an empty list just means that it doesn't have any value initialized, right? It gives back the system, it gives back that space to the system. It's no longer storing any data there. So once you clear it, it shows the square bracket by themselves, no data. Question. Okay. No question? All right, next. Okay, so now we are going to get into the range and some looping, right? Unlike 30A, I'm not going to spend a lot of time going into the details because that's that class. This class is going to go over the basics, but we are going to cover just enough so that way we can build some security scripts. If you need to spend a little bit more time, I can give you, examples and books. And so that way you can have some more practice so you can get more comfortable with Python. And I do have the 38 videos available, so you can also watch that on YouTube. Okay, so let's talk about the next part of our notes here. So here it gives you various examples on how to use your built-in method, and the next part is for range. And I pulled the example from the textbook, and and I also added my own example in here so you can see on how we can use it to search. So range is a function that returns a sequence of numbers starting with the first item by default, and it's going to go from left to right until the end of that group of data or that list. So what you can do is you can make it all sequential. Like I can make number from 0 to 5 by using a range by looping it. And what a for loop does is it's going to go from the start, which is 0, right? And it's going to stop at 6. So all you have to do is put in how you want to start, how you want to stop, and how you want it to step. What if I wanted to increment every 2, right? So I can add in the third parameter to do that. So let's say I wanted to make numbers from 0 through 10, and it's going to be, every other number like 2, 4, 6, 8, and so on, or 1, 3, 5, and so on. So I can have it step every 2. So all you have to do is use 3 parts of the parameter, where you want to start, where you want to stop, and how you want it to be incremented. And you simply put that in here. Now in this one, we're only going to have the stop, which is the 6. So it's going to start at 0, and it's going to go up to 5, and it's going to print each one. So in this program, it's going to go 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which gives you 6 values, and it's going to stop. Okay. Now range is often used with a loop. So in this example, we can use a range method for search. First, we declare a list. Then we give it a search key, which is stored in a variable. Then we use a bool value, which is false, that it hasn't found that yet. So when you initialize false here, all that is it's going to turn 0 on for that location. And then you're going to loop it. So you can say for I in range, we're going to loop it for all the numbers in that list. So it doesn't matter how long this list is. When we're using a length method, all that is going to count up the number of elements that's in that list. So I can have 100, 1,000, 5 million. It's going to go all the way to the end. So we don't have to worry about how many that is, right? We just use the length. And then we would pass in here, we would pass the argument, which is your list name. Then on the next statement, we would say found is, right, an element of that list. If it's the same as a search key, then if it found it, break. That's just going to go to the next section. Then the next section said that if it found, it's going to tell us where it is. It's going to print this element found at index and that value. Otherwise, it's going to tell you it's not found. So for that example, let me show you. Okay, so when we run this, keep in mind that I specify, I want to look for number 67. Okay, and I can run this. It tells me that it is in index 2, which is the third element. What if I try to look for a number that's not there? It tells me that it's not found, right? Because it goes all the way to the end and it's trying to match for each one. It doesn't, this condition is not true. So when you do an if statement, right, you got to give it the condition. So we're saying if found is a value in the list, And if it's the same as the search key, right, it's going to go to print this. Otherwise, it's going to show not found. So it did not meet this condition. So it's going to skip this part and it's going to go to the else because 99 is not part of that list. But if I put in 55, right, it's going to meet this condition. It's going to go here, asset break. It's going to go to the next section of the code and it's going to print. And it's going to forget the rest. Okay, so it tells me that it's found in the 5th index. So this is how, and there are many search algorithms. You know, you can create a search program that's, you know, effective or more effective. This is one way to do it. This is the book way. So I wanted to show you what's being used, almost equivalent to the book. So with that said, let's do the next one. And we might not finish the last two, so we'll come back to that on Wednesday. Okay, for number 6, we are going to make a list of protocols and we're going to search for one using range. Okay. Let's close this and this. So you can use this example, which I did. Okay, and you can name use your string for the protocol names. Okay. And in the book, there's an example that's close to this. That's what I use. So I have FTP, SNMP, TCP, HTTP, and NTP, SSH, and IP. So when you do something like Wireshark, right, basically it's, you have a bunch of protocols, and when you're evaluating packets, what if you're looking for a certain protocol? So you can do a search key and so on. So in this, I'm going to look for SSH or any of the protocol that I want there. So I declare a list of protocols and I use string. Make sure that you use comma to separate each one. You can go as many as 3, right? So I have a little bit more than 3. And I just use the template from the example. Found is false. Use a for range statement. If it is the same as the search key, then break, go to the section, then print element is at a certain index location. Otherwise, right, show the element's not found. So let's run this. So we see that SSH is at index 5. Okay. What if I look for another one that's different? Let's say SNMP. And it tells me that it is in the second element. What if I look for something that's not there? Right? STP. So for those of you who studied and gone through networking classes, right, these protocols should come to you very easily, what they are and what they do. Okay. All right. And then that will be not there. What if I look for UDP, which is also not there? Okay. So that's how you can create the program for number 6. We declare a protocol list, just like what we've done in the last exercise or so, declaring a list. And our protocol is using string. We declare a variable for the search key, and we would initialize what it is, what we're looking for. Now, if you want the user to input, this is where you would pass the input method, right? But we just hard code this in. And then we would say found is false. Then we start a for range loop. Make sure that we bring down the list and put that into the parameter there. We're going to have it loop through the entire list. And as it loop, it's going to look for each of the value in each of the element and try to match that with the search key that we specify here, that we initialize. If it found it, right, it's going to tell us display that it found at that location. If it's not, it's going to show us not found. Okay. So that's how you do number 6. Almost done, a few more minutes. I think I have time to do one more and then we save the last 2 for the next time. Any question with this one? It's on a little longer, but you have an example program in your notes, so you can use that. Just be careful with the symbols. If you copy and paste it into your IDE, just make sure that you retype it. So if it throws error, syntax error is just a typo or an error in your code. So you have to go to that line and see why it's wrong or why it's not working, and then troubleshoot it. Okay. So it takes some practice. Okay. So that was 6. Should be up. Okay, so for 7, we are going to use a tuple. And this tuple is going to contain a group of protocols again. We are going to display the content of the tuple and the second element in the tuple. Easy, right? 3 lines at most. Okay, so unlike the list, the tuple use parentheses, not the square bracket. And we initialize the element the same way we would use the string. So I have a tuple called protocols, and I would put in the elements. So I have HTTP, ICMP. You can use any protocol you want, ARP, UDP. And then I print that tuple. Then after that, I wanted to display the second element, which is index 1, because it starts with 0, so it should display this. Okay. And so there you go. 3 lines. Right? Traditionally, if you use C or C++, you have to do a for loop, or you can look into the library and use a built-in method similar to Python. There are some iterative built-in method for C, C++, and Java, right? A lot of the students, if they're not comfortable with using built-in method, they just implement for loop for everything. So this saves you time if you understand how to work with container and built-in method, where you don't have to write 3 lines, you just throw, that into a print method and it will just go through and it prints everything for you here, right? And then if you want to access one item, you just use an index. So if I want to display the last item, just like what we've learned before, right? We can do a print and then protocols. And we would pass a -1 index here. It's always going to be the -1, so UDP should be printing there. Okay, there you go. Or what if I do a print protocols with a -3? So you're going to go from right to left or left to right. That's up to you. And then I'm back to ICMP again, okay, for that tuple. What is that? Third from last. Okay, any question? It is now 7. So I'm gonna pause here. So far, if you want to work ahead, you can. We did list and tuple and variable, and we also implemented full range in these exercises. We're gonna do 8, which is a little longer, and 9 in the next round, and then a little bit more on class and so on for part 2. Okay, any questions? Okay. I'm gonna stop recording.